Hello, it's John Heaton, and there's not too many solo albums from the 70s which I've yet to review, so I'm going to try and complete those before I do anything else. So, this album from March 1970, from Ringo, the first real solo effort from any of them, if you exclude the avant-garde stuff from John and George. It got to number 7 in the UK and number 22 in the US, maybe partially riding on the wave of his Beatle popularity. It got slammed by most critics. It's an album of covers of songs from the 1940s, of that era, and apparently his mum had encouraged him to make it. And well, before I give you my own appraisal, I'll just read you, for example, Car and Timer. The week after Ringo's first solo album was issued, Paul McCartney trumpeted his decision to leave the Beatles. Could it possibly have been due to the staggeringly poor quality of this most embarrassing to date of all Beatles solo excursions? They call it a gawky, badly sung, over-sentimental selection of moribund mambos. All are dispensable. As I say, that was the prevailing view at the time among the critics. I'm not sure what the fans thought. I bought this retrospectively. This is an Australian copy from the 70s, not an original, I don't think. And I have this copy to show you, which is a French reissue from 1978. So it's on the Apple label, of course. So this is the French Apple, and George Martin was involved producing the tracks. But interestingly, Ringo got an arranger to arrange each song. So you've got people like Richard Perry, Quincy Jones, Paul McCartney, George Martin, Maurice Gibb, Klaus Voormann, all lending a hand. And so these songs are old. They're the antithesis of what the Beatles' music was trying to show. I mean, from a different era, shall we say? But none the worse for that. They're pretty solid songs, and Ringo was actually ahead of his time in terms of recording an album of standards, because many of his contemporaries have done so since. For example, Paul and Rod Stewart and Bob Dylan, to name but 3. So, just an amusing story for you. When I was at Exeter University, I used to go to a pub sometimes which was full of elderly people, and they were literally sitting around the fire singing songs of this era. And on at least one occasion I seem to remember requesting the piano player to play Sentimental Journey, and then before I knew it I was joining a group of elderly people singing along to Sentimental Journey. And they probably thought, how does this 18-year-old know this song's from the 40s? But little did they know I knew it from this album. So that's a little story for you. I think George's reaction to this album was saying it was really nice, and he was happy with it. John said he was embarrassed by it. Don't think we have a record of Paul's reaction. This, of course, was released right at the time, or just before, the Beatles' official breakup. So relations between the four, particularly between Ringo, George and John and Paul, so the 3 of them versus Paul, were particularly strained during this period. So, but Paul does contribute to this album, but I think that was recorded a couple of months before. So this album was started in the fall of '69 after Abbey Road, and continued in the early months of 1970. And I think I'm right in saying they used Abbey Road and also the Morgan Studios in North London. So Personally speaking, I really like this album, and I will defend it. Not every song, but a good 2/3 of it I think is really, really decent stuff. And any number of these tracks could have sat quite comfortably as a kind of quirky number on the White Album. And you can't say that of all Ringo albums, but this one, as I go through the tracks, I'll pick out my favourites. The opening track, Sentimental Journey, for which there is an amusing video recorded at the Talk of the Town, with Ringo singing along with all these dancers, female dancers. That's amusing. Check that out if you hadn't seen it. It wasn't issued as a single, but they did make a video for it. Night and Day. This is one of the tracks which doesn't work. I think it's too ambitious for Ringo to try a track like this because it's not the easiest song to sing, and the pitching is quite tricky, and he doesn't really do a good job of it. Much more suitable to his vocal range and style is Whispering Grass, Don't Tell the Trees, which is a little hidden gem on here, and this is wonderfully sung in kind of Ringo White Album Goodnight voice. Lovely strings, lovely arrangement from Ron Goodwin, and a brilliant tune. I don't know who wrote half of these tracks. They're all, as I say, from the 40s. And Bye Bye Blackbird is next. And this is a spirited, rousing version of this old song, and it's a great version, and it's actually a lot better, I think, than Paul's attempt at the same song on Kisses on the Bottom, which is taken at a much slower pace. This is much livelier. By the way, this pub is a real pub in Liverpool called the Empress, and that's Ringo superimposed at the bottom there, and his relatives in the windows. And when I was in Liverpool, I did ask about this pub, and could I go and visit it, and where is it, and stuff, and I was advised not to go there because it's in a rough neighbourhood. So I wimped out on that occasion. I think the next time I'm in Liverpool, I'm going to damn well go there and have a drink or two, because it would be quite an experience to go to this pub and have a few drinks with the locals, because this pub apparently was in the neighbourhood that Ringo grew up in, so he would have been familiar. I'm not sure if it was his local, but I'm sure he would have gone here on a few occasions. So I'm a Fool to Care, arranged by Klaus Voormann, is next. I think he does a really good version of this song, and again, suited to Ringo's vocal range, and nicely sung, not out of tune at all. Can really handle this one. Stardust, less successful. This is arranged by Paul McCartney. A little bit ambitious for him to try this track. It doesn't really work. Maybe where this album succeeds is where he's doing slightly more obscure tracks. By the way, before I forget, my friend Thomas Calden made an interesting remark recently, saying that the first solo album from each four Beatles contained a kind of aura or a kind of quality left over from being in the Beatles. And I think that's fair to say. One can feel that on McCartney's first solo album, Lennon's, Harrison's, and on this one. By the way, note the T-shirt. Hope you noticed. So thank you, Thomas. I agree with that. And moving over to side two, we probably get the weakest track on the album, Blue Turning Grey Over You, which apparently there are outtakes from this album which never made the cut. I don't know who selected the final selection, but this one should not have made the album, in my opinion. I'm not sure what else was left over. But this is not a successful song for Ringo to do. And Love Is a Many Splendid Thing is okay, but he's a little bit drowned in female vocalists singing along the chorus with him, so it's a little bit anonymous by the time it's finished. Quincy Jones does the arrangement for that. Next up we have a complete highlight, Dream, which is a lovely dreamy number, great arrangement, lovely ballad vocal from Ringo, similar to, as I say, Good Night or husbands and wives. There's that kind of material which he can really tackle well in his solo career, or has done on several occasions. So I love this one, probably one of my favourites. You Always Hurt the One You Love. Quite an interesting one to choose because, as Ringo said in an interview at the time about the Beatles breakup, you always hurt the one you love, and we all love each other and we all know that, but we still hurt each other. So he must have kind of had mixed feelings when he was recording this track, maybe. So for that reason I can forgive it, because I don't think it's the best song for Ringo to tackle, but it's done earnestly and with spirit, and I don't skip it or anything like that. Have I Told You Lately That I Love You is, again, maybe not the best track for Ringo to select, but it's done with gusto, and again, I think Blue Turning Grey Over You is definitely doesn't work. This one kind of works, but it's not a standout. But the last track, the album finishes with a lovely ballad. Maybe the ballads are the best thing about this album, apart from Bye Bye Blackbird, because Let the Rest of the World Go By is a gorgeous melody, and actually features some Ringo harmony vocals, which is pretty rare. So lovely end to the album, and my friend Dave Costello discovered this album after years of ignoring it or not having heard it, and he rates it, and obviously you have to like the Beatles to go near this album, and if you're one of those Beatles fans who doesn't like Octopus's Garden, then I wouldn't recommend you to listen to this album. But if you like Ringo, or if you like the best of Ringo, this album has several highlights and it's worthy of investigation. Thanks for watching. See you next time.